So we have some incredibly breaking news, and if I might say so, this might be the wildest story of the year. Let's talk about it. What's going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream segment of Mikase Sukasa. I am your host, Niko House. First and foremost, I want to say, share this video. Share it. Like this video. Right now, the information that you are about to receive in this video, you will not receive anywhere else. The analysis that you are about to receive in this video, you will not receive anywhere else. If you are watching this video and you are a casual subscriber, if you've heard this information somewhere else, like the totality of it, I give you permission to unsubscribe. But if you have not, I challenge you to subscribe, because what you're about to hear has literally not been talked about anywhere else, because I just happen to be doing some research and I found something that could be absolutely extraordinary in breaking the case about the assassination of General Soleimani. So first and foremost, once again, share this video. Now, Axios released an article yesterday, and it was basically explaining from the Iraqi Prime Minister's point of view why General Soleimani's death was so tragic, but also why it was so egregious that the United States assassinated him in the fashion that they did. In that article, it said something that immediately stood out to me, which was that General Soleimani was meeting in Baghdad because Saudi Arabia and Iran were about to open up a dialogue. That's all the Iraqi Prime Minister had said. Now, it stood out to me because if you understand the tumultuous relation between Saudi Arabia and Iran, for a plethora of, it's a lot. There's a lot of reasons. You would understand that that statement is no small statement, okay? That's huge. That's massive. It's massive for a lot of reasons. Saudi Arabia is supposed to be one of our largest military and economic allies in the Middle East. Why would we sabotage a relationship or a meeting if they're one of our allies, if it would help them, right? Of course, on the other side of that fence, why would we want one of our largest economic adversaries working with Saudi Arabia? So all of these questions start ringing in the back of my mind. But yesterday I didn't have enough time to do the research because news kept breaking. Now, there were a lot of plot holes. I'm going to tell you right now, and I can say with 98% certainty, and the only reason I say 98% certainty is because I didn't hear, Trump didn't tell me himself that he's full of it. But I can say with 98% certainty, every reason that they gave you for the assassination of General Soleimani was BS. And we're going to break those down one by one before we get into the bigger picture. What was one of the main reasons they gave you for the assassination of General Soleimani? Well, one of the first ones they gave you was that an American citizen was injured in an Iranian attack. They've been leaving out a lot of details about that Iranian attack that I want to go over really quick. So that attack was in Iraq, and it was in an Iraqi military base, and it was a rocket attack. Here's the problem with that. They're claiming that it was a rocket attack into an Iraqi military base committed by Iran, which once again, they never showed any proof of. They never showed any proof of this, but they're saying it was committed by Iran. Now, if we have not learned anything else this week, ladies and gentlemen, what have we learned? That at least since 2015, Iran and Iraq have been working together militarily on the ground. So why would Iran risk attacking an Iraqi, not a US military base, an Iraqi military base, and severing that relationship that they had cultivated over 4 to 5 years? Why would they do that? Because here's the reason why this is important to ask. Because for me to assume without evidence that Iran is guilty for the attack that caused the life of an American contractor, supposedly, I would have to assume that Iran was going to risk it all for literally no reason whatsoever. Nothing beneficial about that attack, nothing strategic about that attack. And that Iraq, if they believed it, right, because they have intel on the ground too, if they believe that Iran launched rockets at a military base in Iraq after Iraq invited Iran to help fight ISIS, I would have to believe that Iraq just ignored a blatant and flagrant violation of trust and cooperation that had been cultivated over 4 to 5 years. 4 to 5 years, not 45. That's what that would mean. At that point, you would have to ask the question, well, if that happened, why would Iraq and Iran still be allies? And why would Iraq be so pissed that one of the men who would be responsible effectively is assassinated? Why would they be so mad about it? It's a good question, huh? Maybe because Iran didn't commit that attack. Now, the other claim that is being made is it's the embassy. There were some because that's been getting conflated, right? There were some soldiers, something like that, killed in the U.S. embassy, and Soleimani is somewhat responsible for it, right? That's what we're being told, right? So what? Let's talk about what happened in the embassy really quick. The 2019-2020 attack on the U.S. embassy in Baghdad occurred in Baghdad, Iraq on December 31st, 2019. Iranian-backed Kataib, oh, bro, I'm butchering that, but we're just gonna go with it. Iranian-backed Kataib Hezbollah militiamen and their PMF supporters and sympathizers attacked the U.S. embassy in the Green Zone in response to U.S. airstrikes December 29th, 2019 that killed 25 and wounded 55 fighters from Hezbollah across both Iraq and Syria. Now, that's oftentimes left out of the discussion, isn't it? That the U.S. once again was committing airstrikes in both Syria and Iraq. It's left out of the discussion a lot. Matter of fact, until I did my research, I didn't know that it was in response. So they go and they walk up to the U.S. embassy. Now, if you would listen to the right-wing media and even some of the liberal media, you would think that perhaps they just massacred everybody in the U.S. embassy. Wouldn't you think that? Because they're like, we have to deploy more troops to help out. We have to do this. We got to do that. We got to respond swiftly. And oh, by the way, it's Iran's fault. Yeah, we attacked people in Iraq and we attacked people in Syria, but it's Iran's fault. Huh? Okay, well, let's find out exactly how many people died. The attack occurred amidst the backdrop of the 2019-2020 Persian Gulf crisis, leading the United States to blame Iran and its non-state allies in Iraq for orchestrating the attack, which Iran denied. The United States responded by sending hundreds of additional troops to the Persian Gulf region, including approximately 100 U.S. Marines to reinforce security at the Baghdad embassy. Well, let's find out how many deaths or injuries or serious injuries occurred. No deaths or injuries or serious injuries occurred during the attack, and the protesters never once breached the main compound. I repeat, there were no deaths. There were no serious injuries or injuries of any kind. The protesters that are being called attackers, right? They're being called violent attackers. They never once even breached the embassy. And according to several sources, outside of the United States, of course, they never even tried to breach it. They were literally just protesting the embassy. They were protesting in front of the US embassy. So somebody want to explain something to me? Where is this story coming from? Because I'm sure you've all heard it, right? You've all heard the story. It's been conflated. Well, there was an attack on the embassy and a contractor died, and because of that, some soldiers went and soldiers got killed too. So we had to defeat the evil Solomon because Iran's evil. So after we attacked people that we weren't supposed to be attacking at the time, in launching missiles, by the way, in a country we weren't supposed to be launching missiles in, and we damn sure shouldn't be launching missiles in Syria at all. That's a whole different discussion. People were killed. I'm assuming, probably rightfully so, innocent people were killed. That's generally how it goes, right? There was protests outside of the embassy. In Iraq, it was protests outside of the US embassy in Iraq for missile strikes that happened in Iraq and in Syria committed by the US. So the US turns around and then says, it's Iran's fault. That's who planned all of this. That was their logical conclusion, or illogical conclusion, we should say. It was Iran's fault. Then why was it the prime minister who said, the protesters need to calm down? The Iraq prime minister said, the protesters need to calm down or he will step down. He said that. And protesters dispersed. Why wasn't it Soleimani who then come out and said, hey, everybody, you Iranian allies, why don't you step down, or why don't you disperse, or I'm going to have something to say about it? Because it was Iraq who had control of the situation. It was the Iraqi government and their instructions that the Iraqi protesters responded to. Had nothing to do with Iran. There was no violence, no injuries on either side, no deaths on either side, no breach on either side. Yeah, it gets realer. It gets realer. Give me a second. I'm just sharing this. Okay, so that's two stories that we use as excuses to assassinate Soleimani already debunked. Two stories right there. The third story was the potentiality for imminent attacks from Iran against the United States. Once again, let's go back and reanalyze the situation. We're not in Iran. I think you all would agree with that. We're not in Iran. Because we would, they would wipe us off the face of the planet right now if we were. We are in Iraq. However, Iran has the same pact with Iraq as we had with Iraq. In other words, hey, we'll call temporary truce. We'll allow you to come in to defeat ISIS. Just do not mess, obviously, with our people, and don't mess with our other allies in the region helping to defeat ISIS. In this case, would be the United States. The US made the same pact with Iraq when we came in 2015. They made it very clear. We're not asking for anything else, dog. Just don't attack the Iranians. That's it. Whatever beef you have, leave it outside of Iraq. So the odds of Iran, once again, violating that trust is nil. Because Iran has never, ever said that they've had increased beef or increased tensions with Iraq over the last 4 years from a violation of trust. Iraq itself has never said that they have had a breach of trust or a violation of that pact between them over the last 4 years. It has only been the United States that is claiming that Iran is attacking the US in Iraq, a country that it is not allowed to attack any of Iraq's allies in. It is the US making this claim and wants to convince the world, and some gullible Americans have believed this. They want to convince the world that Iraq is just taking this quote unquote alleged violation of sovereignty in agreement lying down. Even though Iraq has never said Iran has been violating this agreement, and Iran has never said that Iraq has violated this agreement anyway, nor have they bragged about anything that they've supposedly done. And Iran, best believe, they will brag if they're taking you out. They will brag about it. They don't care. So those are 3 major problems with that story. So the conclusion we can draw from the buildup is what? The conclusion that we can draw from the buildup is that seemingly, even if we want to talk about the oil tanker, for example, even before the oil tanker, you can go back to that George Stephanopoulos interview with Tulsi Gabbard that was taken down after Tulsi told the truth that nobody wanted to hear at the time. They were saying that Iran was attacking bases in Iraq. And what Tulsi said was that I don't believe a damn word that comes out of this administration's mouth, because they will say and do whatever they have to escalate tensions with Iran in order for us to go to war with them. That's what Tulsi said. So even back then, Iraq had never substantiated the claim that we were being attacked by Iran. Charles Pereira, thanks for the super chat. U.S. people quickness to say that Soleimani is evil, despite never knowing the guy, shows there's justice and karma for all the social ills that happen in the U.S. Yeah, I would agree. So, you look at the alleged attacks that were happening months and months ago. You look at the oil tanker, where we try to blame them for that. Iran, we try to blame Iran for that. And the Japanese oil, the guy who owned the tanker was like, what the hell? That's not true. Who told y'all that? Fast forward. We blame them for the death of an American contractor whose name we will not release and whose job we will not release. That doesn't hold water, because of the reasons I listed earlier in the video. Then we blame them for protests outside the United States Embassy in Iraq by Iraqis after we launched missiles at people in Iraq and Syria. We did it 2 days before. So we blame them for that too. Then we conflate and say that Iran, or their protests, caused lives and that people, were injured, and because that's what's being conflated, right? That's what the U.S. always does. But I just read it to you straight off the Wikipedia page. If Wikipedia is saying nobody got injured, you know it's bad. They're saying no one got injured, no one got harmed, no soldiers were put in harm's way. So that's a lie. It's being repeated over and over again, but it is a lie nonetheless. So why would all this be happening, right? What does this have to do with Saudi Arabia? What does this have to do with Soleimani? Oh, this is where it gets good. It has everything to do with Saudi Arabia. Now, I know that for many of us, including myself, admittedly, that the mention of a potential dialogue between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it was first seen in that Axios article, or in the article any of the articles yesterday referencing the Iraqi prime minister's statements about the meeting with Soleimani in Baghdad. However, ladies and gentlemen, that meeting was not new. It was not out of the blue. And I know that some people are thinking maybe it was a setup, right? It was a setup by Saudi Arabia because of how much they hate Soleimani and how much they hate Iran. No, that wasn't the case. I'm going to tell you why. Do y'all know that in October, let me make sure I got the date right. This is October 2nd. This is an article in the Iran Project. Saudi Arabia gives Iraq the green light for talks with Iran. I repeat, Saudi Arabia gives Iraq the green light for talks with Iran. This is October 2nd, 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, the talks were not fake. The talks were not a setup. They were real. It's the article. I'm just going to read you a brief piece of it just so you can get an understanding of what the talk's supposed to be about. An official in the Iraqi Prime Minister's office told Middle East Eye on Tuesday that Abdul Mahdi was mediating between the leadership in Riyadh and Tehran and had communicated each side's conditions for talks to each other. In other words, Iraq was the mediator for all of this. Okay? So once again, why would Iran violate that trust by attacking Iraq's allies in country when that was one of the only stipulations? Because that's what the United States has been claiming, that Iran is violating Iraq's sovereignty, despite the fact that dialogue was about to be opened between their biggest adversary in the region, and it was being mediated by Iraq. Why would they piss off Iraq if they're the ones mediating this dialogue? Think about it, people. Think about it. Hasnawi was speaking after a spokesperson for the Iranian government said on Monday that Saudi Arabia had sent messages to Iranian President Hassan Rouhani via the leaders of some countries. Now, some people would say, well, why would that happen? Why would they want to do that? They have no vested interest in doing so. There is no possible reason for Iran and Saudi Arabia to want to get along when Iran is the United States' bitter ally, right? A bitter adversary. We do not like each other. And if we don't like Iran, then Saudi Arabia's not allowed to like Iran, because that's how the shit goes. That's how it's always gone, and that ain't changing. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, some things never change. You're absolutely correct about that. But when you factor in one variable, just one little variable, anything can change. And for my people in the back, what is that one variable that changes every and anything when there's enough of it? Money! Moolah! The big bucks. And Saudi Arabia and Iran both have a lot of one particular resource that rings in the big bucks. And that is oil. It is oil. Now, I know a lot of you may be thinking, well, it doesn't matter, right? Because Saudi Arabia has state-owned oil. In other words, if we control the Saudi Arabian royal family, then we control Saudi Arabia's oil. Duh, Niko. That's how it's always been. And Iran is going to work with Saudi Arabia because that's their biggest competition, and they work with the United States. Yeah, I get all that. Except for here's one thing that did not make breaking news headlines, although in a rational world, it would have absolutely made breaking news headlines everywhere. That is, I'm going to tell y'all the secret. Did y'all know that Saudi Arabia privatized its oil supplies? Did y'all know that for most of last year, they were talking about privatizing their oil supply, and around August, September, October, they made the announcement that they were going to go public. What does that mean for those of you who do not speak stock market nonsense? It means that Saudi Arabia is taking, or has taken now, their oil supply and their company, their energy company, that's what it is at this point. They've taken it public. The royal family doesn't own it anymore. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there is a CEO. There is a board of directors. Saudi Arabia now has a fiduciary duty to its stockholders. Saudi Arabia is trading on the public market. If Saudi Arabia's oil supply is owned by the shareholders, how is it going to be owned by the US at the same time? How is it going to be in control of the US at the same time? Especially when, get this, at least I can't confirm for the US yet, but I can confirm, which probably means it's the same for the US, that the UK has not been allowed to trade and to buy shares. None of the major companies in the UK have been able to buy shares in the Saudi Arabian oil supply. And their company is called Aramco, ARAMCO. If the UK hasn't been allowed to buy any shares, highly likely that the United States hasn't been allowed to buy any shares, which is why it's currently trading around $9 US, $36 Real. And of course, as you could have expected, the first week that it was open to public trading, which was last week, the first week that it was open to public trading, the US embassy is invaded within that time frame. Soleimani is assassinated, and the stocks plummet, with analysts everywhere saying, be careful, you can't invest in that company now. You can't invest in literally the largest public company in the world, because that's what it is now, trading at about 1.8 million in volume. You can't invest in that company now because Iran might attack Saudi Arabia. And so your investments aren't secure there. So no major players can be a part of that company if you want to make sure your investments are secure. That's what the analysts are saying now. Render unto Caesar. I'm actually explaining why I know I can say almost with 100% certainty that Saudi Arabia didn't set up Iran. Part of it, you have to go back and watch it, but part of it is because these talks actually were originally started in October, which brings me to my next point. Thank you very, very much. Saudi Arabia and Iran started their talks in October, or started initiating dialogue, I should say, in October with Iraq as a mediator. While this is going on, Saudi Arabia is making every move left, right, up, and down to prepare to go public, to open up their market, to open up the company with the highest price possible. Obviously, Russia is even in on this. Like, they were in with the process, I should say, not with the company itself. See, Saudi Arabia was actually moved to cut the amount of oil supply, oil barrels that were going out to the world, so they can raise the price of their oil. Because what happens is that would allow them to open up their IPO, their public company, with as high of a share as possible. Russia was in that negotiation process. Not sure exactly how much the United States is in that negotiation process, but I didn't read that they were in it at all, believe it or not. But Russia was in fact in that negotiation process as well. So they're opening up this dialogue the same time they privatize their oil supply, which means, once again, the state doesn't own the oil supply, technically speaking. Of course, let's not be naive, okay? They have a ridiculous influence over it still, I'm sure, but there is a level of because when you go public, your entire company is left up to the public image, right? The worth of your company is left up to the speculative image of your company. If people think your state has too much control over it, then every time something happens in your country, you're going to plummet. People are not going to trust you. You're going to be appointing your board members. You're not going to be electing them. You're not going to be, you know what I'm saying? Like, so there's certain fiduciary. Now, that also once again means that Saudi Arabia has every excuse not to answer at the beck and call of the United States. So as this is happening, all adjacent to each other, right? September, October, they're preparing to go public. They're privatizing their oil supply, taking it out of Saudi Arabia's state hands. They're prepping to have an open dialogue with Iran, the second largest country in the region and the first largest country in oil deposits. They just happens to have a problem with the United States. On the other side of the pond, you have the United States blaming Iran for literally everything. Everything. And then, coincidentally, Saudi Arabia's oil supply gets attacked by Iran, and then Trump sends in the US troops to go save the day. That's right, Saudi Arabia. We're your big bros. We're the allies. Iran is they're trying to attack you, and we're coming to save the day. So just remember that before you go into that dialogue with Iran's leadership. You cause a problem, then you go solve the problem. And then you pretend like you're the hero. So this is all happening adjacent, like simultaneously. Peace talks are being arranged. Saudi Arabia is going public. Iran in November, so this is all happening once again at the same time, finds 55 billion barrels worth of crude oil. And you know what they always say? Where there's oil, there's always more oil. Yeah. This is happening. This is what's happening at the same time. So basically, once again, what the United States is asking you to believe, because the US intel community were the ones who concluded that Iran attacked Saudi Arabia's oil supply. Yeah, the US concluded this. So now we come to the rescue, right? So we have to believe that Iran was once again willing to break down peace talks that its ally mediated in the region over the course of months. Well, clearly, I don't know how much Saudi Arabia believed that, because the peace talks were still going to happen, according to the Iraq Prime Minister, who said this yesterday. So I'm not sure how much Saudi Arabia believed it, but they did entertain the United States and allow us to come and quote unquote protect their oil. Now, what does all this mean in the grand scheme? Well, I will propose this scenario to you. Who is the number one, the largest country in the region, but the number one supplier of oil, and at least I would say the one who is in control of the oil in the region? Saudi Arabia, right? We would all agree. Okay. Who was, before we put crippling sanctions on them, on the way to being the number one supplier of oil in the world? Iran. Okay. And that's the second largest country in the region, by the way. Okay. Right now, that's why we stopped Iran. Who is the number one exporter of oil around the world? And we boast about it so proudly. The United States. Thanks to fracking and the destruction of our environment. Nice, right? The United States is the number one exporter of oil in the world. Iran was on the way to being the number one exporter of oil in the world, and they still have the largest oil deposits. Saudi Arabia basically has control over the markets because of their ability to work alongside and leverage the United States' strength against its adversaries. Do you all remember Wesley Clark? General Wesley Clark talked about 7 nations that the United States was supposed to take over and overthrow and destabilize. Somalia, Sudan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Lebanon, Iran. I'm adding Afghanistan by accident, and it's supposed to be Yemen, but it's one of those two. Oh, not Somalia. My apologies. Libya. That's what it is. There are only 2 countries left on that list. Syria, which is all but destabilized at this point. It's basically almost done. And Iran, which we've made it very, very apparent over the last 2 years, we are planning on taking out. Now, if I'm Saudi Arabia, I've been an ally with the United States for quite some time, right? I know how the US operates. I mean, damn, I'm the one who buys the weapons and sells them to the terrorists for the United States. I'm the one who gives the money to the terrorists for the United States. We're the ones who supply the United States with our family members, like Osama bin Laden. And I've also watched the United States turn on all those terrorists they had previously hired and worked with to overthrow various governments in the region. So, out of that list of 7 countries that we were supposed to overthrow and destabilize, I know that there are 2 left: Iran and Syria. Syria is almost done. Iran is the only one left, which would mean we would have control over Iran's oil supply, right? And so, that would mean that Saudi Arabia should rejoice, right? They should rejoice because we're just going to work together in harmony. We're going to work together with the other largest supplier of oil in the region in harmony, because that's how the United States always operates. Capitalism has always been about fair competition and harmony. Free market of ideas. We're going to let the best quality oil. Sorry, it's hard to say that shit with a serious face. We're going to let the best quality oil determine who everyone wants to buy from. And if Saudi Arabia just happens to have better quality oil, well, golly gee shucks. They beat us fair and square. We'll just have to be the number 2 supplier of oil in the world. No. If you're Saudi Arabia, you've seen the United States betray every single ally they have ever had in the Middle East. Simultaneously, as the United States was basically sucking on the teat of Saudi Arabia and their allies via OPEC, and Saudi Arabia is doing our bidding, we were discovering our own way to become the number 1 supplier of oil in the world. So now, once again, we are the number 1 supplier of oil in the world. Question: United States Capitalism 101. What's the first rule of capitalism? It is not to create competition. The United States has made it perfectly and abundantly clear. The first rule of US capitalism is to eliminate competition. That is why we put crippling sanctions, illegal sanctions, on Iran. That's why we pretended like it was about the Iran nuclear deal. It had nothing to do with that. They were about to become the number 1 supplier of oil in the world. Can't have that. And if we destabilize Syria, and obviously over time that could be in our control. We already gave Golan Heights to Israel, so that's basically our control. We were allied with Iraq, Libya is completely destabilized. We can go in there and take what the hell we want to. Afghanistan is basically ours for the most part. If we get Iran, how would Saudi Arabia would be our only other competition, wouldn't it? That private company that Saudi Arabia just created, that would be our only other competition now, wouldn't it? So Saudi Arabia has studied the playbook enough to know what happens next. After Syria, after Iran, if we were to successfully take over Iran's oil supply, ladies and gentlemen, what do you think happens to Saudi Arabia? So my humble opinion is this, based off of the facts that we have in front of us, it seems to me it is a very real possibility that Saudi Arabia tried to work with Iran to kneecap the United States. This meeting that was being prepped for, as I said, as early as October, months ago, could have been, as once again, the meeting was scheduled the same week the IPO is open to the public for sharing, or for buying and purchasing stocks and shares. Trading. Sorry, I'm looking for. There you go. Open to the public for trading. The same week that this meeting is supposed to happen, they irrationally and stupidly make a move to assassinate the second most powerful man in Iran and the most popular man in Iran on Iraqi soil, and the best excuse they could come up with for literally committing an act of war is that Iran might have probably organized some protesters, which didn't happen. That was Iran didn't organize those protesters. Those protests were in response to missile strikes that we committed, and that isn't me telling you. That's literally Wikipedia admitting that what we did was what started those protests. Nobody died, nobody got hurt, nobody got injured, nobody was put in harm's way in that U.S. embassy. Then they say another weak excuse. Oh, an American contractor got killed because of some missile strikes in Iraq, on an Iraqi military base. And they blame Iran. Once again, what would that require you to believe? That Iran was violating the agreement reached with Iraq to not, obviously don't attack our country, don't attack our military, we're working together, but also don't attack our allies. And that would also once again mean that if Iran was in fact guilty, that would mean that Iraq literally did nothing about it. They did not hold Iran accountable in any way. And that's hard. It's way too difficult for me to believe. I don't believe it. Then once again, the oil tanker incident. Oh yeah, they attacked the Japanese oil tanker, and the owner of the oil tanker was like, "No, they didn't. What you talking about?" And then, of course, the last and final nonsensical excuse. He was planning some attacks on us, I guess. I don't know. That was the last excuse they can come up with. In other words, these excuses were weak as hell. They were thought up on the fly. And this assassination was most likely to stop that meeting from happening. Because if Saudi Arabia and their oil supply work together with Iran, who has the largest oil reserves, when Saudi Arabia is now already working in tandem with Russia now, and Iran's obviously working in tandem with Russia and India now, and they're building positive relations continuously with China. All of a sudden, the United States is kneecapped, isn't it? All of a sudden, we go from being the number one supplier of oil to being completely cut off. from the market. Well, not cut off from the market entirely, but if Saudi Arabia and Iran work together because of their overabundance, because of the proximity in their region, and they start working together, pulling their resources together, they can undercut our prices substantially. And guess what? They would actually make such a huge profit that now, because they also made it clear that this is an energy company, and a lot of their goal is to start shifting to renewable energy. So they would have the dominant market of oil, then the overabundance, right? The profit that they make, they could then turn into starting in investing in renewable energy and beating us in that too. So what is the moral of the story? It's all about the Benjamins, baby. It's all about the Benjamins, baby. Follow the money. Follow the money. Relationships built and designed around goodwill, like the one that apparently Saudi Arabia was trying to finally foster and cultivate between Iraq and Iran, those last longer. Those are stronger than those built out of oppression, aggression, and fear. This has been historically proven true time and time again. So it is very, very possible that General Soleimani was assassinated to prevent a merger unlike we've ever seen, but a merger that would have inevitably led to potentially permanent peace in the Middle East. But unfortunately for the United States, that permanent peace would mean that we were no longer invited to the party. And our elites can't have that, can we? I'd love to know what your thoughts are about this. Like this video. Share this video wherever you can. This information, like I said, is extremely important. The part about like I said, the part where Saudi Arabia privatized their company as all this was happening, nobody knows. Nobody's talked about it. The meeting that was originally, planned in October, nobody talks about it. Nobody's talked about it. This information nobody has talked about because if you look at it in a vacuum, they all seem like disparate data points that don't make any sense. Until you look at that one line from the Prime Minister that was released yesterday. What makes this so much worse is that we were planning on meeting with Iran and opening up dialogue. Would love to know what your thoughts are about this. Leave a like and a comment below. Share this video. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you have that notification bell turned on. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance. Peace. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell if you like that segment of Mikasa Sukasa. Of course, if YouTube is giving you trouble, as it always does, you can download the Rockfin app and follow us there. Also, if you want to continue to help our show grow, you can help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon and donate as little as $1. Really, anything helps. Other than that, always remember, people, more than anything else, find your balance.